Hey everybody, I just wanted to make a quick video, hopefully trying to maybe clear up a couple questions there were about a question that came up in Chapter 4. I know in my discussion sections we were talking about a little bit, and then in my office hours with some students we were still kind of wrapping our heads around a couple of things. So I just want to make sure this is clear, and this is dealing with the question dealing with sex-influenced traits, or how some traits can be influenced by the sex that they occur in. And like, in other words, in this situation, we're dealing with a trait that acts as dominant in one sex and then recessive in the other. And so what gets tricky about this is when we use our coding, capital letter, a lowercase letter, it gets a little ambiguous because some students want to swap. Oh, if it's dominant in this one, I use the capital one, but then since this is a recessive situation, I switch to the lowercase ones. Well, that's not right. This is where the confusion happens. And really what's going on is we're talking about how many copies of that allele that the individual needs to have. So if it's dominant, if that trait happens to be dominant in that individual, they need only one copy of that allele, and then they're going to have that phenotype, the associated phenotype. However, if it's acting as recessive, they need to have two copies of that allele for them to see that phenotype. So that's really what it is. The allele itself doesn't change. There's a changed version of the allele. In this situation, let's say an allele that causes shortage of the index finger, so a short allele, and then a normal allele. And so because when we use these like codes, right, we're very used to these uppercase, lowercase things, for example, it can confuse you a little bit. So I'm going to just do this question again. That's maybe something you might see in the book. But I'm going to use a little bit of different coding. Now my coding is going to be a little more clunky, a little more letters involved. But maybe you'll be able to see that we're talking about the same allele, it's just how many times it shows up. So let's kind of change this up here. So again, we're dealing with a situation where it acts, this particular trait we're talking about, let's say, for example, hypothetically, some type of trait that results in a short index finger. And let's say in males, you only need one copy of that allele, and then you have the short phenotype, the short finger phenotype. Let's say in females, it acts as recessive, so to have the short phenotype, you need to have two copies of that same allele. Well, great. So let's put a code up here. Let's see if I can use all my space. Let's just say hypothetically. I'm not going to use large capital letter, lowercase letter. I'm going to use an actual codon. Now this is hypothetical. The book does a very good job of using real world examples and using codes that are used throughout. I'm just going to use a codon, so three nucleotides. That way we can just kind of see it visually a little bit. It's a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to see. So let's just say, for example, the normal allele. Let's say that is A. You see that? I think you can see it, right? So this would be your normal allele. So in other words, that's associated with the normal. Now again, you don't know exactly what the phenotype is because we need to know how many copies of this they have or whatever. So that's the normal. So for the change, let's say it's AAC. And this actually would, if in phase or anything like that, this actually would code for a different amino acid. But so let's say that this would be involved in possibly having the short phenotype. Okay, these are not exact. I'm just using this for an example so that you can see. So what's causing it for an individual to have the short phenotype, it now all depends on how many copies of this they have. In the male situation where it acts as dominant, they only need one copy, and then the phenotype of that individual would be short. So if they had AAC, right, because these are on the autosome, so you have two copies, then therefore the resulting phenotype for that male would be short. However, in females, since it acts as recessive, in other words, you need two copies of that. Well, if this was the genotype of the female, AAC, well, that female would have normal. Would have normal fingers. Okay, it's not that these are switched, but there is one allele version for the short and one for the normal. So let's put this in a little bit of perspective. Let's say hypothetically there's a question, and let's say that you have a female that has short fingers. Okay, well, so what do we know by that? So we know that it's recessive. So if I tell you that the phenotype is short fingers, and I know that's recessive, that means they have two copies of the short allele. Okay, so that means we have a female. Check my alignment. That means they are AAC. Again, I know it's a little unwieldy, lots of letters here. This is going to be a lot to write in a second. But just so that you can see this, so that's one copy, two copies of that short. The short allele, therefore the phenotype associated will be short. Okay? And let's say we have a male, this individual happens to be married to, with normal fingers. Well, again, now it switches here. For the male, it's a dominant trait, so they only need one copy of the short, and you're going to see that short finger phenotype. So therefore, we can say, oh, well, we then know the genotype. Then it must be normal. Normal. I apologize if the comma is not necessary. I'm just doing that because I have a lot of A's up here. Okay, so then that's what we're looking at here. We have 2 copies of the short allele resulting in a female with a phenotype of short fingers, 2 copies of the normal allele resulting in a male with a phenotype of normal fingers. All right. Well, great. So lots of, I know this is a little unwieldy what you're used to, but at least we can see that it's the same allele that causes it. Okay, so let's say that they have a cross and they produce offspring. Well, you can see that we have a homozygous, homozygous. We can already predict that it's going to be every one of the offspring is going to be heterozygous because of the way that everything is sorts. So we know that all the children, regardless of whatever male or female they are going to be A, C, A, right? So we know that that's going to be the outcome, the only possible outcome. And so because of that, now if we have one copy of the short allele, if that happens to be in a female, well, they're going to have normal. They're going to have the trait that is normal, okay, right? Because the normal is acting as a dominant in that situation. However, if this genotype is in a male, only one copy of that short allele is all that's necessary, and the phenotype would then be the short fingers. Okay, so if we took a look at this, we know that this is the genotype of all the offspring. So let's say they do have offspring. Let's just say hypothetically they have 5 offspring. And let's say they have a female, 2 males, a female, and a male. And we'll just do, like we're writing a pedigree here, what it would look like. Again, we know the genotypes of all of these. We know that it is A, C. We know that there is one copy of that short allele in each one of these individuals, because that's the only thing they could have received from the parents. And so, well, what can we say by this then? Okay, well, a female, AAAC, well, that would be normal. A male, though, AAAC, well, that would be short. So we'll just go ahead and fill that in. Another male, AAAC, one copy of the short allele, it's all it takes. Another female, they only have one copy, so therefore they are normal finger, and one more male here. Right, and if we wanted to do the same kind of notation here, just to make sure we can see what's going on, there is the female. Right, the mother that had 2 copies and was affected with the short finger and the short finger phenotype. And there we can see their direct offspring. We know that all of their genotypes has one normal and one short finger. And just the number you have determines what phenotype you have after that. Okay. Well, so let's say hypothetically also we get the oldest daughter marries. Let's just say to a male with normal length fingers. Well, so we do have one copy of the short finger. So it does depend what can happen here. Well, we know the male with normal fingers would be normal. Has to be. That's the only way that they can have this phenotype. And so depending on the offspring, if they happen to have a daughter, right? Even if they get the short finger allele from the mother, which is possible, there's no way that they can have it. Even if, so the 2 possible genotypes of this, AAA, because the father here is only AAA. So the 2 possible genotypes of this daughter here, AAA, or AAC, and neither of those would produce a short finger phenotype. So it would look like that. Let's go here to the other side. And let's say a short finger female marries over here. Well, so this we know the genotype, AAA, normal, AAC, that causes a short finger. And we also know, since this is acting as recessive, we know the genotype, which would be AAC, short, AAC. Because again, in a female, has to have 2 copies because this is acting as recessive. Has to have 2 copies to have that phenotype of short fingers. Well, so now you can see there is some assortment here. You could have different outcomes for the children, but let's just say that they have males, 2 male sons. Well, the only thing that they're going to get from the mother is AAC. The only thing they're getting is the short allele. So they're going to have at least one, and it only takes one in the males because it's acting as dominant, and so these are all going to be shaded, because all of these have short fingers. So if we did a pedigree, let's just say hypothetically, again, you have a female mother with short fingers, a male with normal fingers, and they had 5 children, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know this grouping isn't very good. This might be what you would look at, and this might be what you would see. And again, it all stems from remembering that even though, yes, it's acting as a recessive here, acting as a dominant here, I have that backwards, that doesn't mean the allele changes. There's still one allele, one code, that's for the short and one for the normal. And it's just the number you have, that's going to determine your actual phenotype. And you could change all this, we could swap all this out. You could use capital letters and things like that. So let's just say hypothetically the big F is for short, little f is for normal. This is fine, you could do that and swap all this out. But it just, we're so used to always saying, oh, that's the dominant. It's going to act not as dominant in these other situations. So it can trip you up a little bit. But we can just quickly do that. So we know we have a normal fingered male. We know it acts as a recessive. So in other words, they have little f, right? Because only one copy is all it takes. Oh, let's say in the female here, this is a short finger female. No, sorry, it acts as a dominant. I apologize. So that means they have 2 of the normals. It only takes 1 to make short. The female here, though, this is where it acts as a recessive. You have to have 2 copies of the short allele, and this is short allele, so this, you can just call it like this. And then we would know, again, we know all of the offspring. The genotype for all the offspring can only be they get 1 from each, and the only option they have is big F, little f, big F, little f, big F, little f, big F, little f, big F, little f. Now, so each of them has a copy of the normal and of the short. In the female, it takes 2 copies, so this would be normal fingers. In the male, it only takes 1 copy of the short. This would be short fingers. Male, same thing. Female, only 1 copy. Normal fingers, short fingers. And then you get the same thing in here. Okay, we have the female with the short fingers. Well, this is FF. Also over here, we get a male with normal fingers. And so we can predict, since this is a female, they could maximum only have 1 copy of the short, so that's not enough. So all the female offspring of this group would be normal fingers. Over on this side, with males, it only takes 1 copy of that short allele to cause them to have the short fingers, and therefore they're definitely getting that. So all of the male offspring in this situation would have short fingers. Okay? So whenever you're approaching a problem like this and it doesn't seem like it fits your normal schema, right? You're thinking of, oh, big, small, whatever. Don't be afraid to kind of swap it out and change a little bit of your lingo for yourself, change a little bit of your notations, because it might become clear. And this is one of the things we're banging our head against the wall in office hours, is because you want to, some students were trying to flip these because, oh, recessive dominant. No, there's allele, just the number you have. That's what's really the dominant recessive, how they're acting and things like that. Well, I hope this helped. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend and enjoy the rest of your week.